from the sun-soaked shores of Saint-Tropez to the dramatic backdrop of Geneva and the thrilling waters of Cadiz, I'm Stevie Morrison, here to give you my take on everything that went down at the last few Sail Grand Prix events. Let's take an inside look.
This is the Rockwell France Sail Grand Prix, Saint-Tropez. And Fletcher and company take a bow. Welcome to the winner's circle. He'll cross the line with a victory in Spain. Give it up for Emirates GBR.
Well, yeah, the spotlight from this European section of the race. And I mean, there's been so many standout performances and great moments that we've seen. Of course, Germany, you know, they had their first event win in Geneva, which was, well, great for the league, even better for the German team. And they've been a really strong performer through this last month, and they'll be very happy with their European leg. But I think for me, really, my spotlight's going to have to go to Emirates Great Britain. That British team's just showed some quite incredible consistency, really. I mean, actually going back before Saint-Tropez, if we look at their results in Portsmouth, they finished second. Sassnitz, of course, after that miraculous recovery, they were up to third overall in that event. And then when we came down to Saint-Tropez, okay, it was a shortened day, very windy first race day. Wasn't without its errors on board Emirates GBR, but with some tight moves and some really accurate boat handling and consistent sailing around the course. They came away from Saint-Tropez with an event win. And then, well, we went from this windy, shifty day to very, very light winds in Geneva. Of course, they had to completely adapt the game. That's the nature of our sport. I guess that's why I find sailing so fun is, you know, one day you need to be a 100-meter runner and the next day you need to be able to run a marathon and play that slower tactical game. And yeah, they didn't actually make the final there, but it was a potential real hiccup event. They came away with a fourth, and that was their only event not on the podium in this whole European season that we've seen. Came to Cadiz,
Come on, man.
event win again. And now they sit on top of the leaderboard. And of course, the questions will be starting to be asked, you know, are Emirates GBR now the favourites for the grand final when we get to Abu Dhabi? I'll come on to that in a minute. But why have Emirates GBR been so good? Well, for me, it's been their starting. And their starting's not spectacular. We can see the Kiwis famous for that sort of ability to pull an absolute bullet start out of the gun and lead the fleet away. But Emirates GBR, they've just been consistent at Mark 1. I looked into the data. We're very lucky, obviously, with the Oracle Cloud here at SailGP that you can kind of get every parameter that you want to find out about on the water. And Dylan's not been like winning a lot of races at the first mark, but he's never really a lot worse than 6th or 7th. So his average for Mark 1 is about 4.5 through this period of racing. 5th overall at Mark 1 on average for the season, but they've stepped up that gain and they're consistently finding themselves at Mark 1 in good shape. Consistency at the start has meant that when they get to Mark 1, they've got a few options. They're able to take those. And I think when you're listening on their onboard comms, things are calm. The maneuvers are accurate. They're never really losing in maneuvers. You might not gain in maneuvers, but I think maneuvers are often the place on the racetrack where you can lose distance if you make those mistakes. What I'd call an unforced error. Being able to do a good tack, a good jibe, a good round up on a mark, absolutely crucial. And the British have done a really, really nice job of that through the season. And especially this end bit, the tempo on board feels good. The comms with the shore, I've heard them working a lot on that in practice, has been good. And it just means that when these tight moments come up, they're ready to take them and they're all fully aligned on the boat, executing well. Consistency absolutely been on point for the British. And well, they look pretty fast around the course as well, which is never a bad thing in these F50s. If you've got that little boat speed advantage, it can make you look like that tactical genius. Are they going to win in Abu Dhabi? I mean, I think they're going to definitely now do that final race, the $2 million race. For me, it's still anyone's race. I don't really see a favourite out of those top boats in SailGP. I wouldn't bet against the British team out there. They're definitely on form, but it's going to be their first ever grand final for Dylan Fletcher. He kind of likes that pressure, but he's never experienced it before. So it's all very well liking it, but how does it actually taste when you get there?
USA and Canada are out.
Yeah, so one of the hardest bits for me is now the lowlights. And unfortunately, the lowlight I'm going to have to really say is going the way of North Star Canada because they've had a really difficult European leg. They look really strong. They went to San Francisco and they were so fast in San Francisco. Another final there, but looked like probably the stronger team. Nature of this event is, it comes down to one race. Can be different winners. For me, they look the best team all the way through that American leg of our season, and I had them down as real grand final potential and potential, challengers for the title. Similar time in San Francisco was when the British, Emirates Great Britain looked quite poor. It was one of their really, really disappointing displays. They looked like, oh my word, have they lost all their rhythm? And whilst Emirates GBR have sort of turned things around and stepped it up, North Star Canada, well, it's really been a tough time for them. And yeah, Saint-Tropez, 10th. Geneva, 9th. And then we came to Cadiz and they were 10th again. And it's just really not the level we've been used to from North Star at all, and not for the talent that's on that boat. And, ultimately we're here to try and sort of think about why. I think fundamentally, when we look in on the data, they've just been struggling with their starts, And then the interesting thing as well, I guess we see with professional sport is just how then momentum and confidence comes into things. And we've seen mistakes in their boat handling. They've made some errors in maneuvers. They've had dramatic crashes off foils. They've just, generally speaking, not looked quite as free and as loose as when we saw Giles with the big fist pump in LA. And I think, the results start to bring their own pressure. They're going to need to find that reset. I know they've got a lot of talent in there. And they've had the odd good start, but it's consistency that counts in this game, not just one flyer where you nail it through a gap. It's how do I consistently get off the start line? It's been a pretty tough watch for me with a lot of good friends involved with that Canadian team. So hopefully North Star will sort of start to pick things apart, make a few changes, but they're needed, yeah. Bit of a low light through this European section for me, North Star Canada.
Race number 1, they are almost 4 wide.
Well, I think the tactical brilliance really, as we see here in Saint-Tropez, is often more about how the crews learn the course through the day. Race 1 here in Saint-Tropez. See in 3rd place, New Zealand. Top of the screen, it's the Spanish coming down in 5th at that point in time. And now all the information for the Kiwis at that moment was to take a right turn. The coaches thought that was the safest way to get to the final mark with just 2 more manoeuvres. If you took the left turn, as you can see, Spain are lining up to do, it looked like, from the coach's perspective, that they couldn't actually get to that mark without doing more than just one manoeuvre. The course wasn't wide enough for them to get there. Well, how do they know that in the booth and on the boat? Well, they've got a little bit of tactical software, actually, that shows them the course. We've got an overlay from onboard the Kiwi boat that shows where they are right now on the course. They're heading in. It shows they can go easily out to boundary, turn once, make it to this final turning mark. Doesn't look like Spain can make that happen. Spain are not even on the screen at the moment. They can't get far enough and wide enough on that moment in time. So New Zealand think they've got things pretty set here. But of course, theory's one thing, practice is another, and that's the unique thing with sailing, really, I suppose, is it's all very well having all this data and all these ideas, but you don't know exactly what the wind's going to do next. You've got to guess and predict things. That yellow line on our screen, that's the lay line. That means the point that you should, in theory, make it to the next mark with no more turns. Here comes Spain, left-hand side of screen. New Zealand heading all the way out towards that lay line. Spain nowhere near it, but there's going to be a big wind shift, and you slowly see the Spanish boat turn up. We heard on board the New Zealand boat at that moment, Berling, where is Spain? What's happening with the Spanish boat? Can they lay the mark? And no one thought they could until Mother Nature decided, I'm going to just change directions a bit. I'm going to rotate the wind to the right, going to shorten the course. And it was the Spanish that were able to take full advantage of that off the side of our screen here. Look at them come, full pace, cutting the corner, sailing nearly, 150, 200 meters less than the Kiwis. And they were in that moment able to turn a 5th into a 3rd. And it was a really crucial moment. And then we move ahead towards the second race of the day. So race 2, New Zealand in 2nd place, chasing down the Canadians. We're on board the boat. This is the data overlay they get here. And well, they've learnt from what happened in the race before. We hear Sam Meach, the coach, come in there say, you can get one and in if you push it really wide to the boundary. Well, they didn't think that before, but they now know that potentially there is that wind shift. Tight duck on the Canadians. See how quickly that all happens there. And here we go. They turn left. They split the course. And I asked Liv Mackay afterwards, is this luck or judgment? Well, I think we find out it was actually some pretty good judgment and some pretty good learnings as they then make their way up the course. You can see here, there's the data in the bottom corner. It shows that they can, in theory, make the lay line if they push it right to the edge of the course. Well, they're keen to take that opportunity here. They stretch their legs wide. And is this the chance to make the overtake? Well, it was the only chance they had, and they pushed it hard. Good manoeuvre on the boundary, and it's all about how they come back together with Canada. So yeah, here we go. They come back together and you can see it looks like New Zealand are nowhere near that ley line, much like we saw with the Spanish in the race before. But we've seen there has been often quite a big shift to the right in the breeze. Canada, they sail, well, in theory, they sail at textbook, don't they? Look at that, right to the ley line. But look at the bend in the breeze. Well, the Kiwis, again, we might call it luck, but I don't really think it was luck because they'd seen that multiple times. They said if we go as wide as we can, we might get a chance. That was what the tactical software showed them. Tactical software can't show them the wind shift and what might happen in theory. It did play out exactly as they hoped it was and really learnt from that race before. They lost 2 in the one before, turned a second into a first in this race. And well, tactical brilliance, sometimes it's all about the learning that goes on in the water as well. Okay, final in Cadiz, and well, it was New Zealand that got off the line first, the Blackfoils. Now they're aggressive here. They're trying to open the door so they have a downwind angle at Mark 1, but I feel they overplayed their hand here. They got a lot of extra distance to set things up, and all that did was bring Emirates GBR a little bit closer. I think here Emirates GBR should have been 50, 60 metres back, not right on the back of the 3 boats. I understand what Burling was doing, but I think he overplayed his hand and left the door a little bit ajar for Emirates GBR to get back in it, who you've got to think are your big threat. Move down the course now, and at that first downwind gate, well, all the information from the coaches, we've seen all the tactical software, we've seen that in some of our previous analysis here, and New Zealand have got the first pick. They get to choose what to do, and at that point in time, they chose wrong. They took the turn back towards the right-hand side of the course and ended up losing some distance versus Emirates GBR. So that decision at gate number 2, we can see it's unfortunately a bit jumpy. We had a bit of radio interference with the footage out there, but we see that decision. Big loss for the right turn for New Zealand and the Blackfoils there. Emirates GBR, well, they've now got in the lead. They're going to work their way up the course. The course is quite open at this point until we get towards the next gate. And I think in these 3-boat finals, what you're always trying to do if you can is firstly sail towards the best breeze. Now, if you're in the lead, you've got the advantage of making that call. But if you can guess where your opposition are going and stop them going towards the best breeze, well, maybe that's what you've got to do. And I feel as we approach gate 3, there was a slight mistake by Emirates GBR at this moment in time. The fans no doubt will disagree with me a little bit. But the Emirates GBR could have turned in front of the Blackfoils at gate 3 and shut the door on them. Think in hindsight, perhaps Emirates GBR were a little bit slow when they come into this manoeuvre. We're about to see it here. They've just tacked on the boundary. Slight mistake in the tack. Got them a little bit slow. Hull touchdown there. So even in all these tactical battles, you've got to execute the good boat handling. But yeah, we know here that the likelihood is Blackfoils are going to turn left at the top. Emirates GBR know that. They're going to sail a lot of extra distance. I think if they'd been going a bit faster, they might have shut the door here. If you can get going the same way as the Blackfoils or force them to sail extra distance, you've got a good chance to make a gain. Emirates GBR don't. I can only assume it's because they're down at 42 kilometres an hour and they know they won't be able to stick a foiling manoeuvre. Well, how does that play out? Plays out that the next time we see the boats coming together, it's the Blackfoils that have made the gain. There it is. Big gain to the Blackfoils. They've jumped ahead. Now, suddenly the decision-making goes again. Boat hoping for a mistake from the boat ahead is Emirates GBR. The Blackfoils have got the box seat. Now, what do we know from last time? We know that a left turn, it was a gain to Emirates GBR. But the comms again up to the coach's booth. Can we make it to the final turning mark, 1 and in left? That means if we turn left, can we just do 1 tack to make it to that final turning mark? Or are we going to be forced into extra manoeuvres? Sam Meach and their best guess from the coach's booth was you wouldn't make it 1 and in. But we know there was less wind near that Cadiz shoreline. Emirates GBR are surely going to probably split from you here. So it is going to be a little bit of the roll of the dice. You've got to take the information you've got. Was it a mistake? Was it a mistake at this point in time? Maybe not. They didn't think they could do 1 and in left. It sure was a mistake in hindsight because Emirates GBR, they're going to have to do the opposite to whatever the Blackfoils do here. I think the Blackfoils should turn in front of them, make Emirates GBR do an extra manoeuvre. Don't give the opportunity for Mother Nature to allow it to be a clear 1 and in from this left turn. And here we go. Blackfoils take it. They lost doing this on the leg before. I think this was a mistake, personally, that they could have seen coming. It's obviously very easy for me in hindsight. That's the advantage of being a coach or a commentator. You don't have to do it yourself. And as they turned out of this bottom gate here, well, it turns out from that left turn, you could get there with only 1 more manoeuvre. So Emirates GBR, they did guess right at the bottom here, and it was a mistake that got punished pretty hard. So the boats come back together and it's tight, isn't it? There was a small gain, maybe that one way, but what it does do is it makes it really hard tactically for the Black Foils. They try and turn in front of Emirates Great Britain. They try and stop them being able to get the overlap because they're outside of that zone, but they don't quite get it right. They open the door there, and I think they opened the door at the gate before. If they could have turned in front of Emirates GBR in these 3-boat races, if you can get going the same way as your opposition earlier, minimise separation on the course, you minimise the risk that you're going to take. And Emirates GBR, well, they rolled the dice. They got given that opportunity, but I think the Black Foils will be disappointed. And when we get to Abu Dhabi, wow, there's going to be some pressure on these decisions, isn't there? Well, one of the best moments of the show for me is we get to introduce Chief Umpire Craig Mitchell. Craig, how you doing?
Yeah, very good. And yourself?
Yeah, not too bad. Yeah, I saw Craig at the weekend in Geneva, racing some catamarans over there, and I have to say I thought your decision-making was spot on for us, Craig. Got them just right as far as I was concerned. So I don't know what all these SailGP sailors are complaining about. But yeah, it's just great to have you on. And I know there was a lot of big calls. We're coming on towards the really important end of the season now, so I suppose the pressure with that drops onto you as well. But yeah, first one I thought we'd perhaps have a little look at is the age-old story of the black flag, the ultimate penalty. You must go home and not compete until the next race. And we had one of those in Geneva, first race in Geneva, actually, pretty slow motion action. And perhaps you could sort of talk us through, if we run this clip here with Rockwool, Denmark, Team USA at the top of the line there, who were the ones that ultimately end up getting it. So, yeah, talk us through it a bit, Craig.
Yeah, well, I mean, as they're approaching the line to start here, you'll see USA, probably a little bit early, and they're going to get to that line potentially before the gun. And Denmark are also coming in, from astern. And essentially, what we want to stop is people pushing in at that windward end. And the main reason is because it's such a massive gain. If you push in there, rather than having to go for the big circle around the outside and go back again, then the gain you get is of the order of 200 to 300 meters, which context is 10 to 15 penalties on our distance penalties. And so we say, don't do it. If you do it, we're going to disqualify you. The second element is that it's dangerous as well. Certainly wasn't dangerous there because there's a lot less breeze. But when the boats are up and foiling, then it becomes a very dangerous manoeuvre. And we've seen that in the past where people have barged in, and it's pretty frightening. And so it's just a stock standard disqualification if you push in. And by pushing in, I mean, you're not the right of way boat. So if someone's got an overlap to leeward, you're a windward boat, you've got to keep clear. That means, and if you've got an option to bail out, then you need to bail out.
So should have come up and missed the mark round the top. And how much of a sliding scale is it? Because, I mean, the one that springs back to me, which is, maybe I'm a bit of a geek, I guess, on SailGP, but I remember one of your friends, Phil Robertson, he used to come in, I remember him coming in at kind of, 90 kilometers an hour at the top of the line, and the French, I think it was, could have squeezed them up towards the mark, and that would have obviously been kind of catastrophic. But as you say, this one's not really catastrophic, but that doesn't change the fact it's a black flag for you.
It doesn't, because it's a hard and fast rule currently. We've discussed it with the teams of whether we should give a little bit of leniency to say, look, there's not much wind, it's not that dangerous, and so should we permit it? But then the question is, well, how many penalties should you get? If you just get a single penalty to go behind the boat you've infringed, then you may well still be ahead of quite a number of the boats. If they just had to go behind Denmark in that situation, is that a fair penalty? And so you're getting into, what should the penalty then be? We have seen times when boats have been OCS as well, been early start penalty. So does that factor into it as well? So we've said no, at the moment it's a hard and fast rule.
Yeah, well, while we're on the subject of starting, I mean, the one that sort of often gets me is this boundary penalty pre-start, or any pre-start penalty, really, Craig. They don't seem super clear. What boundary penalty pre-start, why do we have it, and what's the consequence for the teams?
Well, we've got quite a tight racing area, and certainly in the start box, we want to keep the boat inside the area so we can, people can, the spectators can get closer on that boundary. So we don't want them going outside the boundary. So we really hem them in. And so what happens is the boundary penalty then turns into what is effectively an early start penalty. which is a really harsh penalty. But what we've also then given is the ability for a boat to take that quickly by doing 2 maneuvers. So they just go through the wind and then back again. So flip-flop, tack, or jibe, and that can clear that penalty off. Because we're not trying to ruin their day, but at the same time, we want to keep them inside the box.
Yeah. Okay. So it's clearable, but as soon as they get that penalty, I guess it also, if they could come further back, it would give them a longer run up and a big wind up at it. But okay. So yeah, 2 maneuvers clears that penalty. We see Brazil there picking up a penalty in the shot on this moment here, and it is clearable. But if they don't clear it, it's like they're over the start line. So they've got to be behind all the other starters when they get to mark 1.
Yeah, exactly. It's a big penalty. And certainly in this one, Brazil didn't do the 2 tackle jibe. And sometimes when you're late in the box, you don't have time to do it. So, it's a really massive misjudgment. It's kind of shooting yourself in the foot. But, if you've got the time to be able to do that flip-flop, then you can get rid of the penalty quickly.
Yeah, and then obviously we get into the situation here. All the boats are getting pretty close together. And I'm imagining for you and the umpire team, of course, important for everyone to remember that despite your name normally being the one that's shouted at by the sailors, it's not always you that's making the call out there. But we can have some pretty tight decisions here, and we'll see a situation with Australia getting a penalty in the pre-start. So different to a boundary penalty or an over the start line penalty, when you get a penalty in the pre-start, I think we just had one there, Australia getting a penalty. Again, what's the consequence of that?
So the consequence of a boat to boat is that you've got to go behind that boat. And you can take it as soon as the start gun's gone. So you've really, it's still got a big penalty because you're then limited in what your tactical options really are, because you're then linked to that other boat that you've infringed. So, pre-start penalty, boat on boat, is still a pretty big penalty.
Maybe even since Portsmouth, the Australians have been feeling they've perhaps been not quite getting the rub of the green from the umpire booth. Craig, might be not fair to say. And then this was a really tight incident. We've got Switzerland coming upwind. We've got New Zealand coming towards the boundary, or maybe they're in the boundary. Perhaps you can talk us through that a little bit. And then Australia also kind of in the mix. And one thing that I'm lucky enough to come and join you for the umpire debriefs in the morning, and sometimes I think I should turn up with my popcorn because I just know that it's going to blow up in terms of the opinions of some of the crews, slightly differing from your opinion or how they see it. But this one was unbelievable because the 3 boats come, to be honest, quite scarily close together. And the outcome of the ruling was the Australian boat just needs to disappear. I've referred to Slingsby a few times as Harry Houdini, but I don't know that he's got disappearing in it. So if you could talk us through this incident and then what people needed to do, what they could have done, I found it really interesting anyway.
Yeah, I mean, you've got the Swiss coming upwind. They've just rounded through the leeward gate, over to the boundary and tack up. And so they're inside the boundary going upwind, and so they own the boundary. The difficulty for viewers here is that you don't see the boundary marked on the television screen here. You just see the limit of the course.
So what you mean by, sorry to interrupt, okay, what you mean by that is the white lines we're seeing is the extremity, and then there's a zone that you call the boundary. There's the zone on your screen, but not on ours. Yeah,
and it's an 80-meter zone of the boundary. So from the course limit, 80 meters out from there, that's the zone of the boundary. And when the boats get inside that boundary zone, then we've got new rules which start applying. And so in this case, the Swiss own the boundary because they're going upwind. And then you've got the 2 boats coming downwind, New Zealand and Australia. New Zealand are on the inside, closest to the boundary, and so they then get the room to sail their proper course. The New Zealanders have got to give room to Swiss as well, but the Australians have got to give room to the Kiwis and to the Swiss, and so they're caught in this position where they're in the middle of the action and they've essentially got to vanish. And so in this situation, New Zealand was stopped from sailing their proper course to go around there. Both boats did give the room to Switzerland, but New Zealand couldn't sail their proper course, which is what they're entitled to do. And so the net result of that is that New Zealand come off their foils. Australia just sneak round the back of the Swiss, manage to stay on the foils and disappear off down the road at 50 k's. And so we then have to put a penalty on to Australia because they didn't give New Zealand that room, which is a really massive penalty. So they've got to unwind themselves a long way. So you can imagine the frustration there, and the discussion in the debrief with the teams is, well, how can we have situations where a boat needs to vanish?
Good question.
And that's when it gets very difficult, and certainly the interaction of is the boat an obstruction or is it not an obstruction? Which rule takes priority? And at the moment, our priority is that the boundary zone takes precedence. So the mark room takes precedence, then the boundary room, then the obstruction. And so when you've got the storm there, which is the obstruction coming upwind, which is the Swiss, the priority then goes to the boundary zone, which is New Zealand. So essentially, Australia have got to look ahead further and see if they can extricate themselves before it becomes a problem. And that's a massive amount of anticipation that they need to have. And with these tight courses, 12 boats on the course, Saturday was a really, really hectic, racetrack in that area.
And do you see that being a lot harder? Because again, I think we're only 4 people on the boat here as well. Have you noticed that the sailors are more overloaded and kind of properly at the limit of their brain space, I suppose?
Yeah, absolutely. And so, we also then have, that's why we have, on the wing screen, we give information about distance to boundary. It gives intersections of boats to give them a warning that something's coming up. We've also got the coach booth. The coaches get access to the ump app so they can see what's coming up in the future. But they've got to then work out how they have the comms with their team as to what they should say and what they shouldn't say. Because there's a lot going on at high speeds, and so it's a pretty tricky situation. So we need to look at that rule again and say, do we need to change it? Do we need to alter something, which then will give us a better outcome? So
the debrief from that is Australia should have jibed earlier and accepted doing a couple more manoeuvres.
Yeah, absolutely. That's it. That's the answer.
Okay. I suppose it leads me on a little bit, and I don't want to dwell too much on this because it's a slightly tricky one. But certain of the sailors are I guess more renowned for their energy, let's say, that they bring and the passion that they bring to that, and sometimes that passion can be maybe directed at you, or maybe you don't feel it's directed at you. But are there any rules in place around the language that's used? And I guess I don't feel I should necessarily be saying how does that make you feel, but it's a modern time. But yeah, is there any consequence for some of the language that slips out on the broadcast?
Yeah, it's quite a tricky one. It's never as black and white as you think. We do have a rule that says no swearing on broadcast. And that's really because we want to make sure that the broadcasters will take the show, and that gets complicated. You've got a standard rule which is misconduct, which is unsportsmanlike conduct, impolite behaviour, always bringing the sport into disrepute, and so swearing kind of goes into that kind of area. The difficult bit is that generally a lot of the stuff is within the boat, and the frustration is within the boat, but the broadcaster's looking into the boat as well, and obviously recording it and potentially putting it out live. So how much do the teams need to tone themselves down because they don't know when the broadcaster's listening or not? You've then got outbursts that you've had an umpire decision, you don't agree with it, and we know that not everybody agrees with our decisions, and that's just part of life. We can agree to disagree. So within the boat, there might be some discussion about, well, what a terrible call that was. And, it might be more colourful language than that, but that's also within the boat. But then when the sailors decide to broadcast that outside the boat, so if they come on the management radio, they say that in interviews afterwards, and they imply that the umpires are incompetent, then that's kind of getting towards stepping over the line. So it's a very grey scale, and we're sort of tiptoeing along the edge of it, and then it spills out in social media, etc., etc. So it goes from a simple scale of someone saying a swear word all the way up to, putting out social media posts where you're basically having a real go at the umpires. Sometimes not always based on what the actual rules say. It's how you felt after you'd had that decision. So, it's a very grey area, but it's something where we need to really look a little bit more about how we control that and what the expectation is of the teams. Like it or not, they are role models, and so they have to behave like role models. And so it's how we can work with them to make sure that they are being role models, because their behaviour then cascades down, to junior ranks as well. And if the juniors look up to the SailGP sailors and see them, their conduct and think that's acceptable, then they might take that back to their club and think that it's also acceptable. So it's a tricky subject.
Yeah, tricky subject indeed, but a really interesting incident there. And as you say, the penalties in this lighter breeze especially seem to have the potential to really hit pretty hard.
Yeah, I mean, and we had 2 or 3 where teams were able to stay on the foils, but they've knocked somebody else off the foils, and so you then look at it and go, well, they've got to go back a long way. So should we actually look at changing the penalty system where we give a fixed distance that somebody's got to lose? But I think there's also support from the team saying, well, you infringe me. I've lost a lot of distance because of you. So why shouldn't your position be locked to my position? So I'm sure there's more discussion to be had. And certainly those marginal foiling conditions are the ones that bring out the worst in the penalty system. Nice,
Craig. Look, one last thing before I let you get back to no doubt reading your rule book and jotting back up on all the devilish detail that you have to get into. I want to talk about that final in Cadiz. I suppose it's the last 3-boat final that we're going to have before we get to the $2 million grand final in Abu Dhabi. And yeah, there was a few moments in it. I think, as we kind of got later on in the race, as you alluded to when we were talking about the starting, the British were actually got a boundary penalty, which was a massive error. But then at the bottom gate, so gate number 4, New Zealand had the chance to shut the door on the British on Emirates GBR. They didn't. They chose to take a right turn and split away. It gave a sort of 1 and in option to the British team, as we'd call it. And then we had that coming together at the top mark, final turning mark, in towards the finish. New Zealand were ahead, but Great Britain were then coming back together with them with the right of way. New Zealand went to kind of turn in front and try and shut the door and can you maybe talk us through what was happening rule-wise there? Because I guess the Kiwis weren't in the zone to own the mark, and it all got very frantic, very quick.
Yeah, I mean, it looked to me. I mean, I reviewed the scenario. It looked like when the New Zealanders came around the right turn, they went most of the way to the boundary and probably thought as they bounce off the boundary and get back, they're going to make it into the zone. But they fall about 75 to 100 metres short of the zone coming in on that port tack. If they'd made it to the zone, then they own the turn, essentially. But they didn't make it into the zone, so they have to tack in front of GBR. In SailGP, there is no tacking rule, so you turn from port to starboard as soon as you go through head to wind. So the New Zealanders are looking to basically put the block on GBR, which they do, but then. So they put the block on, and they're clear ahead, and they're heading for the zone. And they get to about a boat length and a half away from the zone when Emirates GBR get the overlap. As soon as there's an overlap, then there's a change of relationship. And so all of a sudden, GBR are now the right of way. New Zealand have got to keep clear, so they've got to start then doing something at that point. And from there on, as GBR turn up, the New Zealanders have got to turn up to keep clear, to get out of the way. They enter into the zone, so that means that GBR own that zone, and it's all on New Zealand to keep clear, which they then do, and GBR turn down and head for the line. In that situation, neither boat protested. Which it's interesting, but also very smart. I think the GBR have learnt from previous incidents. Sometimes it's not always best to involve the umpires, and certainly in that situation, if there had been a penalty go to New Zealand, the penalty would have come off pretty much instantly. So actually, if GBR pressed the button and something, for whatever reason, we think that it was GBR that then infringed, then the penalty would go against them. If they don't ask the question, then we don't step in and make a decision. So, smart move by GBR by not pressing the button. And for New Zealand, they know that they're the keep clear boat. So, they're probably not enticed to press the button either.
Do you think the Kiwis could have manoeuvred any earlier in front of Great Britain there to stop that chance of the hook, or would that have then opened the door? Do you think the British would have been able to then go up and round the other side?
Yeah, it's a really difficult one, isn't it? Because there, if the Kiwis slow down too much, which they do, they lose about 15, 20 Ks in boat speed. And if they tack too soon, they're not going to be able to make it up to the mark. So they were in a really tough position there. Tack sooner, maybe don't make the mark, and they go around the GBR luff and go around the outside. Tack too late, and GBR get the overlap. So yeah, it's
rocking a hard place.
Just rocking a hard place, definitely.
Right, so you said there, Craig, you said that was about a boat length and a half. So what are we talking about there? We're talking about 30 metres from when Britain got the overlap before the zone. Is that roughly it?
There's about 35 metres, yeah.
Well, Craig, look at that final. And I suppose in that instance, there was a decision that, as you said, there was maybe a few seconds in it, a few metres. Perhaps that was an easy call. Still looked quite tight to my eye. But the winner of that race, Emirates GBR, got $400,000 prize money. Second place for the Kiwis, they got $240,000 for that. So that's a difference of $160,000. You can see my maths education paying off well for me right there. That you could have cost someone with a dodgy call. We're about to go to Abu Dhabi. Grand finals coming up. One race. Winner gets $2 million. Second, 0. So that feels to me like, given some of these decisions we've seen where there's absolute fractions of a second in it, meters, centimeters, perhaps making the call. And occasionally these things even aren't black and white, they're grey, as we've kind of, alluded to on a few things. How are you feeling about that?
Well, we're acutely aware of the pressure that's coming on, and certainly in the first final there was a similar situation, which was the kind of the $1 million call, and we do talk about it regularly about the fact that we are going to have to at some point make a call that is going to switch where the money goes. But that's something that you've got to kind of train for. You've got to be objective, and you just got to focus really on the on what you see in front of you. But that's a massive pressure moment, for any official. But that's all part of the job. You don't shy away from it, but at the same time, you try not to think about it too much. You try and keep your judgment level.
Yeah, fair enough. Well, good luck with that, Craig. Thanks very much for joining us. I can't wait to get to Abu Dhabi. I just think we've seen over those 3 events through Europe how tight all of the racing is, and there's a lot to learn. Maybe some of the sailors and coaches will have been watching this show and seen a few of our thoughts on it. But Devil will no doubt be in the detail, and good luck with that decision. Should it come your way, Craig, and we'll be sure for watching and looking forward to it.
Yeah, good to talk to you again, Stevie, and we'll see you again soon.
Well, I hope you enjoyed getting a bit of an inside look there. It was so nice to catch up with Craig Mitchell and looking on some of those real tight rules decisions that we've got going. Abu Dhabi is fast approaching on the horizon. It's going to be a huge grand final this year. We know that for sure. The racing's so tight. All still to play for out there, and I don't really want to have to pick a winner at this stage. Yeah. Send us your comments in below. If you've got any questions or things you'd like answered, well, Craig and I will do our best to get back to you on those. Thanks for watching. Look forward to seeing you next time. I'm Stevie Morrison, and this has been SailGP's Inside Look.